start with this song. So, thank you, Anita.
So just to let you know what the words to that prayer song say, give me strength, give me the good things in life, praise to your Creator, give us strength, give us the good things in life, praise to your Creator. That song was taught to me by my grandfather, Pat Charleson. So,
if you want to introduce yourselves, then they can talk about the opening.
So before we do a little introduction, we're going to do things a little backwards, but I think that Lena will give us a little leeway. What I'd invite you to do is just take a moment and notice what happens inside right now after Anita has shared this. You might notice things in your belly or in your chest. You might notice things in your arms or your legs. It might be fast, it might be slow. It might be movement, it might be stillness. And these may be familiar sensations that you've had at other times, or they may be kind of surprising. But just to take a minute and notice what happens inside you as Anita shares this prayer song. Part of what we're talking about is the connection between healing, culture, and a little bit connected to what we call somatic psychotherapy. So how we heal from a body, mind, spirit perspective. And so that's just, this is a little part, we'll talk more about it a little later, but I have just the invitation to notice what's happening in your bodies right now. We also wanted to start with a little exercise because one of the conversations we had coming into this is recognizing that trauma, which is part of what we're talking about, can be pretty intense for people at times. It can be pretty overwhelming. And for some people, this may activate a lot of emotions, a lot of memories, a lot of sensations. I know I get some of those things going on. And we want to recognize that we don't want anybody to be left in an uncomfortable way. So we want to make sure that we're helping people come back into good, healthy regulation. And that, of course, is the goal of healing. So if you notice at some point that your body starts getting all busy, or your brain starts getting busy, or you're having memories that are uncomfortable, please feel free to take a break. We're going to do some things that will be helpful around that as we go along, because we know that's pretty normal. And managing those sensations or emotions or thoughts is what healing trauma is about, and how is one of the ways that culture can be really supportive. So in this moment, what we'd invite you to do, Anita and I were talking earlier, this is an exercise that both of us would use a lot. We'd invite you to think about 3 times, maybe we'll start with 1 just in the last couple of days, where you felt strong or connected or calm and settled. And just think, kind of grab one little moment in time, almost like you could take a snapshot or a picture. Some of you might want to write that down, some of you might just kind of hold it in your head. And just see that moment. And as you remember that moment, to again notice what happens in your body. Where things might move, where they might settle, where they get looser or tighter, where you even notice yourself. And then, once you've got that, I'd invite you to take another little snapshot, almost like we have one of the old Polaroid cameras. And this time we're going to take it somewhere, take a snapshot somewhere in the last 2 to 3 weeks, where you felt strong, where you felt connected, where you felt supported or settled. And take that second little picture. And again, noticing what happens inside you as you look at that picture. Even though I was feeling a little anxious earlier, I can feel the breath opening in my lungs a little bit, like can't quite see. I'm going to push this down. Oh, kind of here I can feel this kind of pulsing opening. Some of you may be able to see me. I'm right here. And then a third image. In the last 2 to 3 months, it's a little bit longer time, to think of another moment where you felt strong or settled or connected. And again, take that little Polaroid snapshot. I like the little album that I create with these images. And again, just coming into yourself and noticing what happens. It might be similar to with the other images, but it might be different. Do you notice things in your belly, in your chest, in your arms, in your legs? Is it slow? Is it fast? Is it warm? Is it cool? And then to just have a little look at all three of these images. We have a little snapshot of a part of your life.
Just to add to that exercise, one thing that I do, or I've done, to kind of indigenize it a bit, is I'm from the west coast of Vancouver Island, so we have a lot of stones on the beach that are available, and so or along the riverside. So what I do is, when I'm working with the group, I hand out a stone, and when they think about those three things that give them a sense of strength, comfort, or joy, I ask them to think about it and put it into the stone, so that anytime, throughout the workshop or presentation, you feel triggered, you can go to that stone, and that stone is a reminder of the strengths. But you can use anything really, a feather, whatever is available to you, a cedar bough, just wanted to add that piece.
So that was one of our invitations, is it may feel appropriate later in the day, because we couldn't pass you stones out through the internet, sadly, that you may want to go and find a stone or a feather or another object and just make that connection between the object that you can hold and these pictures, your photo album, and also the sensations in your body, the way that helps you feel.
Thank you so much for opening in a wonderful way the circle. I feel really honored to be here, and I felt the song just, like emulating through my arms and my legs, my upper body, and it was really, really beautiful. Thank you so much. So, our purpose of UBC Learning Circles is mostly to share tools with people who need to kind of use tools within their work spaces, within communities, and with their environments. So I just want to reiterate, today is not going to be a healing or sharing circle. We're not able to facilitate that through this technology, but instead we're going to be adding tools to your box when you're dealing with people who have been through crisis and trauma. And the word we want to acknowledge, crisis and trauma, can be triggering. But if you find yourself struggling with any intense emotions or sensations, thank you for this tool, the technique, to bring us back. I would like to say that there's a couple of different 1-800 numbers. If you want to write them down right now. They're also available on the Adobe Connect in the description. That there's the Indian Residential School Crisis Line, if you've experienced that, 1-866-925-4419. There's the Women Against Violence Against Women, which is 24/7, 1-877-392-7583. The BC Crisis Line, 1-800-784-2433. And on the Adobe Connect, there's the other numbers of different provinces too. So again, the intentions of the session are not to provide healing, but to learn about successful practices in healing work for professionals to development with their locations, their schools, their teams. And this run will be made available as part of the resources in this session. We'll also be recording this session, so please be aware that if you say anything, that it will be recorded. If you do have any questions, you want to be anonymous, you can put anonymous or anon on the webinar in your questions. We'll be breaking in between for people to comment and stuff as well. A couple breaks, but please keep them brief, and if you can keep them succinct. And that even as care providers, we know, and health professionals, as you are, most of you are out there, we can be triggered by certain words or conversations. If possible, please ensure that you have access to support systems around you, friends and family. And that UBC personally, with this the internet connection video conference webinar, we can't provide these services via video conference, or the internet is just impossible. and make sure that you can access these numbers if you do need to access these numbers. So I want to start briefly talking to Dee and Anita both about what the work they kind of do, and just give us an oversight of what your day looks like and what you've studied before, because I know both of you come from interesting but complementary backgrounds.
You want me to start? So first, I just want to kind of acknowledge that I can see some faces out there, and it's nice to see faces. It feels funny. I'm used to presenting to a live audience, so in-person audience, but it's really nice to be able to see your faces, so thank you. Thank you for showing up. I live in Port Alberni, in Nuu-chah-nulth country. I am not Nuu-chah-nulth, I am half Japanese, and half, as my mother says, Heinz 57, which means a little bit of many white things. I am a trauma counselor. I specialize in doing somatic psychotherapy, which is really a way of healing trauma that remembers that we don't only have emotions and heads, but we also have bodies, hearts, and spirits. So that's part of how Anita and I have connected. I also teach for the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, so I teach this work to many different kinds of healing professionals, including counselors, body workers, massage therapists, doctors, all sorts of nurses, all sorts of different healing professionals. And it's a way of understanding how trauma dysregulates all of us. And that's part of Anita and my connection is when I moved into Nuu-chah-nulth territory, Anita and a number of other very generous folk were willing to teach me about how culture does this thing that somatic psych all knew and dandy and their very own. And she and other colleagues were very kind to share that culture actually knew about this and was doing this same work long before somatic psychotherapy came along.
My English name is Anita Charleson-Touchie. Hooks, Nanik Sue, Pat and Mamie Charleson, Barney and Irene Howard. Hooks, Newweek Sue, Con Charleson. Hooks, Umeek Sue, Arlene Howard Gansky. Hooks, Chaku Tyson Tucci. Hooks, Tatnas Skylene, Tyson Jr., Jada, Jason, and Tiani. So I'm a woman from Ukiulet, Laksut. I got into the helping field in the late 90s. I was given the opportunity, at the time I was pursuing my degree in psychology at Malaspina University College, and at that time there was a program that was in partnership between the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council and Malaspina, and it was called the Kuasa Counseling Diploma Program. And what drew me to that program was that it had a cultural component. I'm a second generational residential school survivor, I guess. My parents went to residential school, I didn't, but my grandparents went, my aunts and uncles went, and so, you know, through that process of colonization, I didn't grow up knowing too much of my culture and language. So when this program came up, you know, I jumped on that opportunity, because in that program there was the Western ways of helping, you know, counseling, but there was also Kuas ways of helping and healing. So there was a cultural component and elders teachings and language. So, you know, the reason why I took that program was the cultural component. And I never thought that, you know, after all these years that I would still end up being in the helping field. I ended up also going to UVic to pursue my master's in counseling psychology. And I'll be finishing that up in January, so I'm really excited. It's kind of been a long process. But, you know, I think things happen for a reason, and I'm honored to be here. You know, on my profile, I listed my children and their ages, and I put my oldest daughter as 22. And when I was telling her, I showed her my profile, she's like, "Mom, I'm 23. So I was like, oh no.
That makes everyone look good.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna apologize to my daughter Skylene on national So my daughter's 23.
And give her 10 years and she'll be happy to be a year younger.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the intros. So my name is Lena Menifee. I'm the facilitator here at UBC Learning Circle, and we are funded through the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health and also First Nations Health Authority. And really our whole goal is to kind of give tools to First Nations communities and those that work with First Nations communities to try to close the gap on health and wellness in our communities and try to increase some of the capacity so people don't have to come and travel to do this, so we can do it through the conference and technology in a good way. I thank you guys for joining us. I'm very excited about this. We had the most registrants I think we've ever had for a program since I've been here for the 6 months. I just want to make sure I acknowledge that a bunch of people who helped make this happen too. Catherine Berry, Davina Ridley, who's here with us, Leah Walker, who's in the room, thank you for joining us. Also Stephen Prevost, who's been the technology person, but is being replaced by Gurwinder Singh, and Rob Preston, who we're happy to have with us today, who made it possible for all the video conference people to join and make sure everything worked well. So we'll be starting with the PowerPoint presentations now. Please feel free to type in your questions in the webinar, as I said, and we'll pause so video conference can ask us some comments or questions too. And we'll also have a moment where we'll be asking you some things on the chart back here as well. So thank you, everyone.
So as you can see, we're going to talk about trauma and culture. And then Anita's just going to bring up. There we go. So what we wanted to let you know is that we sat and had a number of teas and meetings and sat and talked. And what we came up with is there's a lot of really interesting things to say. And so we want to have a conversation between us, with Lena, and also with you about what is trauma and how do we heal trauma from both a Western perspective and the First Nations perspective. And so we're going to just kind of engage in that conversation. We had tea again this morning, and I got all excited again because there's some really great stories and examples that we're going to talk about. Yeah, and we also, as we did at the beginning, we're going to share some of our practices, some of the things that we actually do. But I want to acknowledge that this isn't, we're going to share what we do from both of our cultural perspectives, but a lot of that will then be translated and changed according to the cultural practices and teachings in the communities where you live and work. That there's always that translation piece. Anything you want to say?
And that reminds me of you know, the work that I do. Anytime I learn Western ways of helping, a question that I always ask is, how does this apply to me as a Nuu-chah-nulth person? And you know, as with the exercise earlier, the resourcing, where Dee asked you to think of those things that gave you strength, you know, that was an example of what I do to make it fit for who I am as a Nuu-chah-nulth person and who I work with. So I'll also explain some other things that I do, to make some of those approaches more suitable for the First Nations that I work with.
So we wanted to start by just talking about how we see trauma. What is it? And from a somatic psychotherapy perspective, trauma is an event that overwhelms a person's ability to cope. And so one of my teachers says trauma is really in the nervous system. It's not, it can be a small car accident, but if that overwhelms my ability to cope, that's traumatic. Another person could go through an earthquake, a big, really intense earthquake, but because they get the support and they have the kind of inner strength themselves, that might not be traumatic. And so we're really looking at trauma is about the dysregulation in the nervous system. It also disconnects ourselves, our sense of self from the body, from the nervous system, from the psyche, and from the spirit. And so it's about this kind of disconnection.
And from a First Nations perspective, First Nations cultural knowledge understands trauma to be a disconnection between the self and spirit. The spirit has left or has been jolted from the body. The work then is to help bring the spirit back. And, when I thought about what it means to me as a Nuu-chah-nulth person, what trauma is, I can't help but think about my elder mentors, who've taught me over the years, especially late Ray Seacher. He was a big part of helping me to be who I am today in the helping field. And Dee and I were talking this morning, reflecting about one of the things that he said when Ray and I took the SE training, the Somatic Experiencing Trauma training, was throughout that training, although it was said in a Western way, these were things that he was taught by his grandparents and our ancestors. So in those somatic experiencing terms, it was something new, like Dee mentioned, but I remember Ray saying, this is something that our ancestors have known from the beginning, so that connection between our tradition and SE, there was a real good fit. And I thought about Ray when I just reading this slide. So I felt like I needed to acknowledge him and some of my other teachers. So I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for my mentors.
So the way that I see it is it's sort of like science. Science, this holy thing in some of Western culture, is finally catching up to what many people, including Nuu-chah-nulth and other First Nations communities, have known for a very, very long time. And it gives me a little giggle to understand that that's really what it is, that there's all this very interesting and fascinating brain research and neurological, neurophysiological research, and they're just really coming back to really ancient knowledge. And I like that. And that's our conversation. That's what Anita and I have done.
So from a Nuu-chah-nulth perspective, we as human beings have different parts of our being which are all interconnected and reliant on each other. And if you take a look at the wheel on the slide, this is the Nuu-chah-nulth Wellness Wheel. And I mentioned that in the late 90s I was in the Kuasa counseling program, Well, there was 11 of us in that program, and after a few years of sitting with the elders and learning the language, learning more about our values and principles as Nuu-chah-nulth, we were introduced to the mainstream medicine wheel. But we found that there were some pieces missing, especially in relation to who we are as Nuu-chah-nulth. So that's what this wellness wheel is. So the mental part of your being has to do with your thoughts, your thinking processes. Physical is your body, your physical being. Emotional, that's connected to your feelings. Social has to do with the connection to others outside of yourself. But you know, when I sat and listened to elders, I realized that social is also, in a way, a connection to the land. Nature has natural rhythms, you know, that help regulate our being, you know, and there's so many stories related to learning from the animals, learning from nature. I remember hearing my mom talk about her grandmother and how there were times where she would just sit in the smokehouse and just be, you know, and or go and sit on the beach and connect with the rhythm of the waves coming and going. So social. Spiritual is on the outside, and the reason why it's on the outside is because it encompasses all of those other parts. So no matter what we do, the spiritual component is an important part, and it's there, you know. So no matter what I do in my life, there's always a spiritual connection. At the center of that wheel, in our language, it's called Tlimaksti. Tlimaksti is your inner being, your inner spirit. So that's what the wheel represents. So from this perspective, trauma is an imbalance and or a disconnection of the different parts of our being. Trauma is also when the Tlimaksti is out of balance and depleted of life energy. Another really important part is Hishakish Tsawak. Hishakish Tsawak in our language means everything is one and all is interconnected. So that says what happens in one part of our being, whether it's, you know, mental, physical, emotional, social, spiritual, whatever happens in one of those parts, positive or negative, will have an impact on all the other parts. So if an individual experiences a sense of overwhelm in any of these parts, then all the other parts will be negatively impacted.
We should pause there. Just
Sure.
yeah. So part of at this point, what I'm wondering is if it would be good to just take a little bit of a break and hear any questions or comments. Yeah, just get a little bit of interaction. We're going to move on to the next piece. Will be sort of what does trauma look like, but I think now just to sort of look at this idea of what trauma is from multiple perspectives.
Usually the first question I get, sorry I didn't address this before, is the PDF of this PowerPoint going to be available to people who attend? Information. Do you guys mind sharing that if you would like to? Okay.
We just ask that people credit
and
Anita and Nuu-chah-nulth for that information.
And we put it in a PDF format, so it's not in a PowerPoint format.
Great.
So, if you guys could respect and just use it for your own notes.
Yes.
And then we can just put it up on the website on a link, and I can email it out to the people who registered after.
Yeah.
So.
You know, just touching on that point reminds me of the big difference between the Western form of educating in Nuu-chah-nulth. You know, I went to school for so many years, you know, did my grade 12, then my bachelor, and then went on to my master's. And during that time, I felt like I was like hoarding everything I was learning. You know, I wanted credit for this, and but then when I go home, it's like, no, what you're taught, you have to give, you know, put out there to share, or else you're going to take it with you, you know. And so I just really wanted to, you know, stress that teaching from the elders too. It's like, you know, when you're being taught something, it's really important to give back. And that's I was so excited to come, because, you know, knowing that we're reaching isolated communities, because I work on the West Coast and travel to some of the isolated communities and know how difficult it is to access resources, and so I'm really happy to share.
If anybody has any questions, please go ahead, type away on the webinar. Again, if you want to be anonymous, you can. Video conference, I'll open it up to you now. If you want to unmute your microphone, if you have any questions for Anita or Dea, please go ahead. Is anybody in video conference? I can't see you right now because the PowerPoint's up, but...
Hello?
Hello.
I just wanted to say that here in Chihuahua, I believe that we know about the spirit being out of someone's body when they experience trauma. And I know that a number of our people are trained to put the spirit back in there. And I know that some people in the community experience trauma like on a yearly basis, like an addiction, and they know how to put their spirit back in their body all the time.
Isn't that wonderful that we
like
can learn how to do it? Yeah?
Yeah, it's like a cycle of, it's a cycle that I think some people go through, and but like I think 90% of our people don't know how to put their spirit back in their body. So they wait for someone to come and take care of them, which is good.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have people who know how to do that.
Yeah, they do community birdings, like feeding our ancestors. They'll feed them, and then at the same time they'll do spirit work on people in the community. Yeah, so it's very good. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I really appreciate hearing that, you know, because that's how it is in my teachings too, you know, that strong connection to spirit. And yeah, you know, like I mentioned on the wellness wheel, it's a part of everything that we do. And I'm going to touch on some ceremonies that, you know, I've led or been a part of, and how there's always that connection to the Creator and ancestors through ceremony, and that you know, it also touches on some things we've lost along the way since colonization, you know, like being able to draw on our own resources, especially the culture. Yeah, but I think so throughout the presentation, I'm going to definitely touch on that.
There's a question actually that's that Lori has asked us. Cultural teachings around trauma are great, but sometimes the trauma becomes intergenerational. The destruction of culture and family, there are many people who do not have family or those that know about these ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I struggled with that for many years, you know, because I didn't know some of our traditions. I've been fortunate though to have family But one teaching that really resonated with me when I was going to UVic, there was an elder that came from Arizona. He was a guest at UVic, and something that I heard, you know, from different elders along the way, you know, is, oh, that's not our way. You know, we don't do that because that's not our way. And, you know, then it was kind of, at that time, I'd be like, whoa, you know, it didn't feel right in here. But at the same time, I wanted to respect what the elders were saying. So I asked this elder, I said, I'm struggling with this teaching. You know, you're offering me to use your way, but yet I've been taught that it's not our way, so I don't do it. But one thing that he told me was that it's okay to borrow until you learn your way. And so that's something that I really took to heart. When he said that, I was like, yes, that feels really, you know, I noticed that I felt open to it. I wasn't closed. And so what that also did was it opened a door for me to go home and learn my way, you know, learn our tradition. So I think the same can be said for those, you know, who may be struggling with not being connected to family or their own culture, is that it's okay to borrow. And another teaching that I've learned is that there's no right or wrong. And well, I think if you follow your intuition, you'll know if something feels right or doesn't really fit.
Yeah, well, and I think that's sometimes where I might come in Nuu-chah-nulth territories. Sometimes people feel more comfortable coming to see me from that sort of psychotherapeutic counseling perspective. I feel comfortable coming and talking to a counselor. But because of the teachings that I've received, I know that it's both from Nuu-chah-nulth folk, but also from my teacher, Peter Levine, who teaches Somatic Experiencing, that acknowledges the importance of spirit. That then I know that there's sometimes we hit a bump where we're not moving forward from the trauma therapy work, and it's like, now I know who I need to make the referral to. That it's to Anita or to some of the other people in the Kwasa program who do spiritual and cultural work, and when people make that connection back and do that work, then often our work moves forward in a different way. And so I think that I like that, just to borrow. And you know, I also am lucky enough to teach with an organization that has people around the world. We have people teaching in Brazil. I was thinking about a faculty meeting where we were talking with some of the faculty from Germany, and we were talking about the multi-generational, intergenerational effects of the war. And we were asking them, gee, how and what is it that you guys are doing to heal those multi-generational effects of the war that then we might be kind of translating into our work? So I like that idea of borrowing, yeah, and learning from each other.
Yeah. And I had another really excellent point, but
It'll come back.
Yeah.
Well, Laura was mentioning PTSD too. Sometimes today's trauma can be a reaction of PTSD and a big reaction to a small crisis, and the inability to cope with small crisis due to this intergenerational PTSD.
Absolutely. And due to that dysregulation or unbalancing in the medicine wheel or in this idea of, you know, spirit, psyche, body, all those pieces. And when we are off balance, when it's weighted to one side, any little thing disrupts our balance when we're off balance. It's only when we're really settled and have good balance throughout the whole system that we can poke at it and challenge it, and it comes easily back into balance. We're hoping in the near future we're going to do another webinar around, really specifically around somatic trauma therapy and how that dysregulates the nervous system. That may be interesting to some of you. but it is exactly this piece of having a vulnerable, out of balance system. Thank you, Laura. You're hitting some really important. We're also talking about doing another webinar around specifically on multi-generational trauma. Anita's been doing a lot of work in that area.
Somebody was asking about songs like ones you sang and recorded. My answer was it depends on the tribe, nation, or cultural teachers if they record those, if they're available digitally. I just mentioned that some peyote songs in the Southwest, I guess it's less controversial. They're actually available on iTunes and things like that. But for the most part, it depends on the nation and the tribe who has those prayer songs, where they go to. So.
Like, for example, the song that I shared this morning was passed on to me from my grandfather. So it's a family song, and we, from what I understand, is that, you know, it will be okay for me to pass that song on to my children. And I know that there are relatives I have from other communities within Nuu-chah-nulth that also sing that song, and that speaks to Hishakish, Zawak, you know, everything is connected. So that song is dispersed in a number of communities through our family connections. So that one particular song is a family song, but there are some songs that are shared, you know, across nations. Like an example is in the program that I work for, the Kuasa program, we were given permission to use a prayer song that a man composed because it really fits well to the line of work that we do. So.
And I hear from people that they have recordings of their family's songs, and they will use those to come back into relationship with self, to come back to self, and that's really helpful. Sometimes the real recordings, sometimes they're the recordings they make, you know, their own recordings in their head, but there are some actual cassette tape recordings, I believe a lot of those are, not MP3s or even CDs.
Yeah. So I have, I don't know if you can see my bundle on the table. Those are some things that have been gifted to me over the years. And when I was coming in this morning, I was thinking, you know, how these are all different tools that I use in the work that I do today. But I was thinking something else to add on to there. Because, I use my iPhone, you know, to record songs that I want to learn, prayers, you know, in the language. So, yeah, it's been really great to be able to have that in my hand when I'm on the ferry and practicing.
And Susan just said, thank you, Sue. If you listen to your spirit, it has its own song, and it'll be your own personal song, which is part of our culture for many of us, is to come up with that. And we kind of lost some of those practices. But I think we're going to move on now to continue with the slides, and we can take a break in a bit after.
Yeah, so I just want to share a thought. Kuas in our language is human being, and you know, I think no matter who we are or where we come from, when we treat ourselves as a human being and other people as human beings, then you don't really need to worry about approaches and protocols. You know, it's like when you're coming from here, human being to human being, that's a connection there.
And I think that's how we connected in the work that we did with each other, was on that human being level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the somatic psychotherapy and the traditional First Nations perspective trauma descriptions are so much alike because they're really kind of going into that place where we are human beings.
And that's one of the greatest teachings I've received over the years, is treating people as human beings. So now we're going to start exploring what trauma looks like. And so this is where I'd like to engage some of you in exploring what you think this looks like. I have my flip chart behind me, and so I am going to ask, in your experience with people who are in that trauma state, what is happening for their mental part of their being? What do you notice?
Okay, so in your experience with people, I'm just typing this out.
Okay.
In that trauma state, what do you notice?
Yeah. Or what does their mental
Or what does their
being look like?
mental being look like? Okay, so anybody can answer that question. Video conference, if you want to go first. In your experience with people in that trauma state, what do you notice? Or what does their mental being look like? And we're pointing to this, the medicine wheel, what do you want to say? New-chah-nulth
Wellness wheel.
Wellness wheel, okay. I was going to say oriented New-chah-nulth. Yeah. New-chah-nulth wellness wheel. So the mental, the physical, the emotional, the social, and the spiritual. Video conference, did you want to unmute your button and tell us what you notice when you're engaging with community or people you work with?
There they are.
Hi.
I noticed that, I noticed that the clarity of thought pattern is really disorganized and they get really forgetful.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. And anybody else from video conference world out there?
Hello. Hello. We noticed that people rely heavily on other people to take care of them mentally, or they don't. They try to rely on someone else to, do all the mental parts for them for how long would you say, Deanna? At least 10 days. At least 10 days, I think they do that, and then, and sometimes longer. Yeah, there's different kinds of crisis that happens, I think, that tell you how long you should be there with someone.
And that 10 days, I like that you guys made that observation because it's a normal part of a difficult or overwhelming situation to have your brain kind of stop working for a while. But we know that it's kind of setting in, that it's not being, it's not resolving or re-regulating. If it goes longer than that kind of 10 days or a couple of weeks, right? But then we know there's something a little wrong and we should be getting more support in there. It's normal after a challenging event for there to be a little time where okay, I'm just going to ask people to help me make it to my appointments and remember to eat and that kind of thing. But if it happens too long, then it's a warning sign. That's great.
Well, we try to help past the 10 days, but we don't get a lot of support like currently, so that's one of the things we're looking at having as a strength in the community to build on more support.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anybody else for video conference? I have a
Negative
list still.
question here.
Hi, Hoishin.
Hello. Hi. Hi, yeah, negative thinking.
Yes.
Negative thoughts. Everything is doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good one.
Can I read out some from webinar now?
Sure.
Thank you everybody for your comments and reading and keep typing away. I have difficulties coping. The connection. Another one is the connection that's being made between traditional and contemporary is a huge reassurance. Or maybe somebody's making more of a comment.
Great. We like comments, questions, brilliant insights. They're all welcome.
That was for the iPad actually on the can't think straight, poor memory, mental racing, disorganized, anxious, fearful.
Right.
I'm probably talking too
Okay.
fast.
No, yeah,
Overly
these are all
aggressive.
good examples, yeah.
Good, and what we might do, so overly aggressive, emotional, they might even, are those more in the emotional state as part as well, Anita?
And also so much in the head and out of the body.
Right.
Emotional lability, disjointedness in their lives,
Okay.
violent inside, violent outside, difficulties regulating emotions. Great. Thank you everyone for all these answers. Going into overdrive,
Yeah.
unhealthy coping mechanisms, binging, purging, substance use, self-harm, suicidal thoughts.
Great.
So I wonder if we could take some of this list and start putting them into the other categories.
Yeah.
Does that make sense,
Yeah.
Anita?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Maybe we just want to start with one of the areas? Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping
Okay.
for. So now we'll look at physical.
Okay, so I can...
Yeah, somebody who's in a traumatic state, what do you see in their body? What do you see in their physicality?
Okay, so I think the answers are kind of the whole gamut. So let me go through and kind of...
This group's really smart is what's happened.
Thank you,
They're ahead of
everyone.
us.
Yeah.
There's a comment?
Rigid body.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have low energy. Thank you for your comment.
Yes.
Low energy. Reactive, like physically reactive.
Reactive, I wonder if that's like
Hyper-reactive. Hyper-vigilant.
Hypervigilant, yeah. Yeah. So there's a kind of classic, very popular now psychotherapy, trauma psychotherapy word, hypervigilant, meaning always sort of on the lookout, and that connects to the negative thinking, always looking for where trouble's coming from, not being able to rest back and feel safe.
So chronic illness too.
Yes.
I have here physical pain.
Please feel free on the video conference to
Yeah,
chime
video
in
conference.
too.
Chime in whenever you want to on the physical.
They're short of breath.
Yes.
Oh, a good one.
Great.
Thank you.
And a lot of, I guess, headaches, aching in the brain.
Yes, aching in the brain. That's a great description.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I have some more coming in. Keep it coming, guys. Weight gain, weight loss. Could be either or. Panic attacks. That's physical.
Dehydrated.
Dehydrated. Yeah. Lack of appetite too. Then as well. Leg shaking. Restlessness. Crying.
Absolutely. What you got me thinking of earlier in one of the comments was about that sense of being kind of frozen. So there's some of this sort of hyper, lots of energy, lots of movement, but then there's also that state of being kind of frozen, super quiet, more kind of shut down, like there's not much going on inside.
So numb. Like could be a
Numb,
numbness.
absolutely, numbness. Yeah.
So stress response like the flight, fight, or freeze.
Fight, flight, or freeze. You gotcha.
And I have some more mental ones coming in too. But maybe we should, do you want me to move it to the
Yeah, let's move on to
emotional?
emotional.
Okay, so everybody on webinar, if we can do emotional now. I know a lot of you already contributed. I might read out some of those, but video conference, feel free to talk about the emotional aspects. And I'm gonna keep looking at the webinar.
So somebody mentioned overly aggressive.
Yeah, and violence, yeah.
Question here.
Hello.
Hi, we're just saying cheerful, anxious.
Great.
Thank you. Isolation?
Good swings.
Okay, social, sorry. Keep going, video conference, you can talk.
Mood swings.
Oh, rude.
Mood swings,
Thank
excellent.
Crying.
Neediness?
Inappropriate behavior.
Inappropriate behavior.
That might be a social too.
Like the addiction's really
Dependency on pills.
Yes.
Okay, that's a dependency. That's a physical one almost though. Yeah, thank you. So like the substance use, that'd be more of a physical kind of need.
Yeah, like where I live up north, the hospital that we go to, a lot of the elders and the community members, when they go to the hospital and they're under a lot of stress or they just had a death in their family, they push sleeping pills on them, anxiety pills and whatnot. And so that's been really overused in our community.
That's a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
grieving.
So that, just to touch on that, the over-prescribing of, sleeping pills and other drugs, it makes you ask the question of whether those are helping people, process what they're experiencing, or if it's a form of numbing out,
Well, and because
Exactly.
and sometimes they're really appropriate. They're kind of a good short-term solution while we get these kinds of things happening, while we get more support to get the wellness wheel in balance. Sometimes they can be a lifesaver, but again, they should be short-term use. We want to use them to help people make sure they get some sleep or to make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves. But then we want to be looking at this wellness wheel and get things in balance so they can come off those. That's so important that we start to build these capacities. Thank you for bringing up that point.
Thank you so much. Is there a
With the
Okay,
Go ahead.
with the prescriptions of medications from the doctors or the hospitals, that prohibits the person from going through a natural process of grieving, right?
Yeah, it can. Sometimes my experience is it also makes it manageable enough, but it's a very fine line, and there has to be those other supports so that exactly they can move through that process of grieving. You're right, we never want to interrupt that. We just want to make it manageable. Yeah.
Thank you.
and I'll read out a few more things, and then we're gonna have to move on to the social. Okay. Just for time's sake. So.
No emotions at all.
Yes.
So, yeah, blank, almost a blank slate. Thank you.
And that's often connected to that numbness or frozen kind of state. That's great.
Fearful. Sorry, the emotional is still like fearful.
Oh, yeah.
We said hypervigilant already, violent, anxious, aggressive. Okay. So now we'll move on to social. So social.
So what would people like to say about the way that trauma can impact our social self, our social being?
Well, it stops the social from moving.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about what that looks like?
Well, people stop moving around. They kind of cocoon themselves,
So isolation and
and they
withdrawal.
they stop moving.
Yeah.
So they don't move anywhere for a while, and And I think people have a hard time getting them to come back out.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from video conference? I'm gonna try to. I'm like getting a big list in here, so I'm gonna verbally say it out. If I cut you off, I don't mean to be rude. I'm just trying to get everyone's answers in too. Anybody else in video conference? Go ahead. I'm gonna name isolation, withdrawing,
Paranoid.
paranoid. That's thank you. Difficulties sustaining relationships, withdrawal from family and friends. Fear of developing or maintaining the relationships they already have. Unplanned pregnancy, that's an interesting one. Trying to deal, yeah.
So sometimes it's a withdrawing socially, and sometimes it's sort of moving into unsafe or unwise kind of social situations, right? Because I don't want to be alone, because I'm feeling so upset. So I'm kind of driven out to be partying more, to be having sex more, to all of those kind of over-socializing.
Resistance to participate in healing activities. Self-harming behavior. Loss of trust. Flashbacks, that's a good one. I'm making her write so fast right now, you guys. Thank you. You're a wonderful,
Anita's good.
wonderful group. So yeah, risky behavior, excessive drinking. Okay. This is a great list. Anything else for video conference? And then we're gonna move to the spiritual. Anything else for video conference?
All right, so speak up about the your spiritual sense of self.
I have one right in that kind of fits on this line of social and spiritual. Disconnection from nature. Don't go outside, don't go hiking, don't do those things that you do anymore. Blaming the creator. That's
Yeah.
Video conference, anything in the spiritual realm that you noticed?
Ignoring it as if
So are you the lady?
ignoring it as if that dimension doesn't exist, trying to pretend it's not there.
Okay, and then now you can go again. The next person.
Oh, just connected. There's no connection to the spirit.
Disconnection.
I was speaking with a woman the other day who had just had a car accident. And she came into my office and she said, I don't feel like myself, and my family says that they don't feel like I'm me either. And we did some work, and when she left, she said, I feel like myself again. And her family was shocked. She came back and they're like, wow, here you are. You've been away since the 5 days since you had the car accident, and we know that you're back. And that's, kind of a hard thing to describe, but probably most of us can know what that feels like on the inside when we've lost that sense of connection to ourselves.
I have great answers coming in. Loss of meaning, loss of purpose, loss of belief, bartering with Creator, trying to negotiate or make promises, loss of previous spiritual connections, not attending spiritual activities, crisis in the spirit, faithless questions, having visions of deceased persons, maybe being with them, loss of knowing who you are, feeling lost.
I would put in here feeling suicidal.
Yeah.
Is often a connection to our spiritual self.
Stop believing in self.
Yes.
That's a great one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anger and aggression too.
Of the spirit.
Really great answers.
Thank you, everyone. That was one. Yeah, thank you.
So, as you take a look at all of these different signs of trauma within somebody's being, the different parts, negative thinking, rigid body, low energy, anxious, mood swings, isolation, disconnection from spirit, you could see what kind of impact that would have on a person's klimaksti, their inner being, their inner spirit. I mentioned on a previous slide that there's a sense of loss of life energy, and I think that's where our klimaksti gets impacted. If we're facing all these different states, then that definitely will have an impact on your inner being. And something else that's important to note about the wellness wheel and Hishukitawak, the idea that everything is connected, is that there might be overlap in different areas, you know, and that's okay because it's all connected. Yeah. So this is a great example of what trauma looks like, you know, for an individual.
Absolutely. No, well, I will say something, because this is a great, when I teach the trauma work from the somatic psychotherapy perspective, we come up with a list that's very similar to this, but it's organized a little different. But really, the same symptoms are what shows up. And again, we're just talking about human beings. Mm-hmm. And no matter which way we come at it, whether we're talking from a, you know, science, sort of the new science perspective, or whether we're talking from a traditional perspective, this is what happens to human beings when they face overwhelming events and don't get the support that they need. The good thing is these things don't happen when people do get the support that they need. And that can happen culturally, that can happen socially, that can happen within family, that can happen by seeing a counselor or a massage therapist or a doctor. That there's all sorts of ways that we can prevent these kind of symptoms from setting in over the long haul. They're going to experience them in the short term after an event, but they don't have to hang around for months or years.
So moving on to the next slide. From a Nuu-chah-nulth perspective, trauma is also a disconnection between the self, family, community, culture, nature. When parts of the system experience a sense of overwhelm and or pain, then all of the other parts will be impacted negatively. It's like that ripple effect. And I also just wanted to note that it's important to explore and understand how the socio-historical context has an impact on individuals, families, communities, cultures. So that, you know, is the impacts of colonization and oppression. Although this isn't an important issue, this discussion will be left for another presentation. But it's really important for individuals to understand that history. And, you know, speaking from experience, when I started my undergrad degree, I did a paper on residential school. And prior to that, I didn't really have much knowledge about that history. But then after I did research, you know, and interviewed my grandparents and my parents, it was like an aha moment. You know, for years, growing up as a child, a teenager, a young parent, you know, with the oppression that I experienced, I internalized it. I always thought there was something wrong with me, something wrong with my family, we didn't belong. But then when I did my exploring of my history, then I was able to say, wait a minute, it's not something that's in here. I was able to take it out, put it on the table, and look at it from different angles and say, there's nothing wrong with me. you know, there's something wrong that's happened to our people.
So,
So that is externalizing it, putting it out, taking it out of myself. And then when I came to that place, I was able to feel that sense of empowerment, you know, and challenge those stereotypes and stuff like that.
so if we look at this diagram that you've done, Anita, really you thought that the problem was in this smallest inner circle. And what having this bigger perspective and understanding about residential school and colonization allowed you to move the problem out of yourself and recognize that it's out. I'm not sure if it's out at the nation level or at the all humanity level.
It's almost, I feel like it's almost a part of all of those things, right? Because it crosses all those realms.
Yeah. And, you know, this speaks to one of the comments too earlier about intergenerational trauma. And when I do work with youth and, you know, people who haven't gone to residential school, and I do my presentation on the impacts of colonization and oppression, I can see it clicking, you know, much to the same that I had those aha moments. You know, it's like, wow, you know, that just how much that impacts us as beings is huge.
So I have a couple comments here. Tina was mentioning that sometimes trauma can bring us to a point of healing too. So thank you for that comment. Sometimes the trauma may help us find our spiritual self or our faith.
Right.
So not just putting it into negative, but putting it into positive outcomes.
Like I have an example of that just recently. You know, my family has been facing numerous challenges, and they were like layers, you know. And then we had an experience where it was kind of the last straw kind of thing.
The straw that broke the camel's back.
Literally, you know. So when this last situation happened, it got us to the place of allowing ourselves to be angry, you know, as a normal part of the grieving process. We got to that place we were pissed off, you know. But then if that situation didn't happen, I think we probably still would have been angry like that, you know. But this situation came and then we were angry, but then we came back down, you know. And
sort of like the blister burst.
But you know, these experiences are only making our family stronger.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
I'm wondering if your slides, because I haven't looked at them yet, honestly. I usually do, but some people are talking in regards to the service providers themselves, or the communities or the support services have been affected also by the same trauma. I don't know if you deal with that, about trauma for the service providers in your presentation at all.
I think it's all related.
So what I would say is all of this applies to us, because we're human beings who love and care for our own families and the people who we work with. We're impacted by what happens in the communities. We may be community members who are helping, and so it may be our own family who are helping. Or it may be, in my case, someone who I love and care about, who I'm helping. And that all of these, we need to be looking at our own wellness wheel and working on keeping that in balance, and doing the spiritual work, doing the counseling, emotional work, getting some work physically, going out and doing our walks, staying connected to Creator and to nature. All of this applies. This is the Hishukish Sawak. We're all connected. And it can't be that if I'm unhealthy, it's not going to affect the people who I love and care about.
So self-care.
Yeah.
And the wellness wheel is a great tool, for your own exploration. You can take a look at all the different parts of your being and you know, kind of get a gauge on where you're at. When I was going to UVic, my wheel was totally out of whack. You know, the majority of my wheel was mental, and so much of the other parts were left unattended to, you know.
I have that same experience
Yeah.
at universities
Yeah.
and colleges.
Yeah, so, you know, but sometimes you're in that place of kind of survival mode, you know, and sometimes you kind of need to, there wasn't any room for me to not be like that when I was trying to complete my master's. So I knew that it was a sacrifice at the time, but what I was grateful for was that I was aware of it, you know, because when you're not aware, that's when it can be scary. That's when behaviors can go on and can spiral, and start affecting, you know, your family, your community.
Yeah, and you had that awareness that it's for this last semester or these 2 semesters, but I know the work I have to do when I get back. And you could see where you were going to work and build more balance in the system. So yeah, sometimes we can sacrifice in the short term, but we have to have that awareness that we need to come back into balance.
Yeah, and that it won't sustain in that mode.
Because it wears down the pre-months, right? That's what happens. And then only by getting it back in balance can we refill.
Yeah. Are you sure you're not going?
I look like I'm from Port Alberni. When I moved there, it was great because I met all these people and they all look like the aunties and grandmas that I grew up with in the Japanese community. The faces were the same. My father, my grandfather, they would all fit in the childhood country. So it's like coming home.
So let's move on to, I don't know how many more we have. I think we're doing pretty well.
So now we're going to explore what healing looks like. So from a First Nations perspective, healing trauma is about bringing the spirit back, restoring, reconnecting, and balancing the different parts of our being. Healing is about lifting up the Tlimaksti so we can be who we are meant to be our true self, and truly experience Teechuktl, which is life. So that was another teaching, you know, that took me a while to get, you know, was that when you're balanced, when you're living as a kruas, a human being, then you can be your true self and you can, you know, experience life. And that was a message I heard from one of my elders just the other day, you know, let go of that pain, let it go so you can be who you're meant to be, you know. And it was like, wow, that's just so powerful. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. When I read that first piece, Bringing the Spirit Back, I was thinking about some good friends of mine who teach this trauma work. They were doing some work in First Nations community, and they did some of this somatic experiencing healing. And one of the elders said, "That looks like a soul retrieval to me." And it was like, oh, and that there are many moments in the work that I do where it's like, I step out of my sort of somatic psychotherapy lens, and it's like, the spirit just came back. I can see it, I can feel it, and I love, and some of the people who I work with, First Nations or non-First Nations, I will use the First Nations perspective on trauma because it makes sense. It fits to them, and it isn't just First Nations people, it's also many non-First Nations people who go, yeah, that's my experience. I lost a part of my spirit, and I can feel it come back, or I want it to come back, or I can notice it starting to come back.
Just for you, those wondering, thank you again. Just for those wondering, we're going to go for another 30 minutes, so if you want to grab some more tea or water or take a quick pee break, you can do that, but we're going to be here for another 30 minutes. If you have questions and stuff, you're going to extend.
So Healing also means reconnecting and maintaining a positive connection and balance of self, family, community, culture, nature, etc. Balance. Being balanced means being able to take a look at your being. It means being self-aware, aware of how you are doing as a whole being, and then being able to figure out what parts of yourself can be strengthened. So this is, the self-care piece. For all of us frontline workers, this is such an important part of being able to do the work that we do. And I encourage you to utilize this wheel to explore yourself.
And so if we again look, we're kind of bouncing back and forth here, but from a somatic perspective, we're talking about restoring the person's inner experience of being able to protect and defend themselves. This is a really important part. When we experience an event that's overwhelming, we don't feel like we can take care of ourselves. We don't feel like we can protect and defend. And often we're left sort of wanting to. That's part of that kind of hyper-vigilant, that anger is, I'm out there trying to protect and defend myself. And so we restore that feeling of capacity in the body, in the nervous system, in the psychology, and in the spirit. And we have to have all those spirit parts to really effectively protect and defend ourselves and feel safe in the world. It is about that sense of feeling whole and safe in the world.
So I work for the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council's Teechuktl program. Teechuktl in our language means working with the spirit. Kuasa means taught to be human. It's like you have the right teachings, the proper teachings, to be respectful, to other human beings. So the work that we do through those programs is we offer both Western and Nuu-chah-nulth ways of helping and healing. So often, we have our clinical counselors, but we also have our Kuasa wellness workers. The Kuasa wellness workers work from a Nuu-chah-nulth perspective of helping and healing. And it's not so much, with a treatment plan, not so much with a certain approach in working with people. It's about having your cultural toolbox ready to go with the needs of the individuals that you're working with in that moment. It's about connecting as a human being.
This would be a lovely time for you to just tell a story of how you your team have done that.
Well, I can share from my own personal experience. I mentioned that lately my family was being challenged with many different situations, and with my self-awareness, I was able to realize that and slow down and say, okay, we need help. So I reached out to our Kuasa wellness team, and our senior Kuasa wellness worker came with 2 other wellness workers to our home and did some cultural work with their family. And in that process, in our culture we use spruce boughs and cedar boughs, for some of the cleansing. It's like the cleansing is a brushing for your spirit. It's about taking off, whatever negative you're experiencing. So they did a brushing or cleansing with my family. With the spruce boughs, we're asked to think about all those negative things that aren't helping us to be who we're meant to be, a human being. Think about those things, put it into the spruce bough, and let it go. So there's more to that ceremony, but that's kind of the gist of it. It's a letting go. You put it into the spruce. When you're ready, you step forward onto the cedar bough. The cedar bough is about moving forward. It's about protection, and so that's what each of our family members did. But throughout that whole process, there is a prayer chant and a rattle, so the songs being sung, cultural teachings are being taught, water's used. After we're done with the brushing, we drink water to help purify our inside. And then, the elder led, he did a beautiful thing. He had us stand in a circle, but me and my husband were facing out of the circle. And he was talking to my children, saying, there may be times when your parents aren't really there, because of the grief, the layered grief that we've experienced, that sometimes we're not there. We're there, but we're not there. So when we were in that circle, our backs were faced towards our children. And for me, that was, as the mom, that was such a powerful message. And it was a reminder for me that, I need to turn around, I need to face my children and be there, So he had us turn around and face the circle. And he gifted our family with the feather, not this feather. He put the feather in the center of us and asked each of us to grab the feather. So we were standing there, there's 7 of us in my family. We have 5 children and me and my husband. And we were each holding on to the feather. And he was giving us teachings about family, about strength, connection. And then he asked all of us to look at each other in our eyes. And that was a challenge, it was a challenge for a few. But everybody did. And the strength that brought to our family was amazing. And I, being the student I am, just thinking of how powerful it was, this was family therapy in action, with our ways. So, the strength of our culture in healing disconnection is powerful.
And it's been interesting for me as having not belonging in culture, not having had those teachings, to be taught some of the teachings, to know who to go to for those teachings. That's really important that I learn about that. I learn about how within my own frame I can use some of those teachings, but also who I refer out to, and recognize that I think that was such a cool thing for me where finally, after years of Anita and people teaching me, there's this other stuff that's important for me to finally go, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. Maybe this is where it is. And sending someone to do some work with the Kwasa team, and them coming back, and our work moving forward leaps and bounds, because that work had been attended to. And I don't know how to do that work. Just like if someone had a broken leg, I would refer them out to go get their leg healed, and we'd come back and do some more work after they could move their leg, after they could get up the stairs. it's important that I refer out for some of this other work because I don't have those teachings, but that I get interested in them. I have to tell a little story because I moved, not very long ago, I moved to a new office, and I asked one of Anita's colleagues, I said, I think the office, I'm not quite settled here at the office. I think it's that the office needs to be cleansed. You know, could you come in? And he brought some family in to do that. And very quickly, they assessed that it wasn't really the office that needed to be cleansed and supported. It was me. And they did some work on me that was really profound for me to experience, understand, to receive it from that perspective, and also to very kindly, very, very kindly, to be told, don't forget about yourself in this, don't forget about my own wellness wheel. Yeah, so it was wonderful.
That's actually, there's a parallel conversation that's happening online in the webinar. You just brought it completely back there. So people are talking about learning about self-care. Chris, you just said self-care is one of those things that we are all aware of and could probably use some more of, but caring for each other in the field, I think it's a huge benefit to the self and others. We need to be aware enough to notice when people need to debrief, cleanse, take a break, and offer that support to each other and be able to accept it as well. So there's one big question that Jamie wanted to answer about vicarious traumatization. Thank you, Davina, for looking that up. Jamie wanted to know about the role of vicarious trauma, if there's been much awareness, education, or discussion of how vicarious trauma affects us. If I could just read the definition, because some people...
Well, and I'm going to speak, I'd like to actually speak to that, because vicarious trauma means that it happens when we're watching someone else in trauma. But vicarious trauma is trauma, right? Mm-hmm. It is, there actually isn't any separation. When we're overwhelmed by being with someone who is overwhelmed, that's trauma. And we don't have to separate that and say that it's anything different. We will expect the same symptoms. We will expect the same, we will need the same kinds of support. And all of these pieces here that Anita has been teaching is we need to care for ourselves in the same way, because it is just that we are experiencing that same sense of overwhelm, that I don't have the capacity and the support to deal with this. And I need to come back and do some assessment and get some support and go to my people, whoever they are. And I need to have people who can support me physically. I need to have people who can support me mentally and emotionally. I need to have people who can support me in a social way. And I need to have spiritual support. All of those pieces need to come into play for when we're experiencing what they're calling vicarious traumatization, which is really trauma. You want to say something?
No, I think you summed it up.
I think okay.
Yeah.
They said thank you and well said, so I think that answers some of the questions that was happening.
I did have, so within our team, I work for the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council, and we're separated into 3 regions. The region I work in is the Central Region, and we have a team of 4 under our mental health program that service 5 tribes. And one of the tribes is the biggest tribe in Nuu-chah-nulth, and so the importance of debriefing and checking in, you know, within our team is key in preventing burnout. You know, every Monday morning we do a staff check-in. After incidents arise in the community, we take time to debrief with each other, but we also get support from a clinical supervisor who comes in to our region once a month and offers debriefing and case consultation. So, you know, in my experience, the more support we have for our frontline workers, the less likely they're going to come to that place of overwhelm.
And do you think that your model is unique? Can you say anything about?
Yeah, I think it is. that's a whole nother presentation.
Well, we might ask you to come back for that one. But there's lots of people working in the community out
Yeah,
there.
so, you know, one thing I've noticed with our Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council is that Hishukish Tsawa comes out in our organization, you know, so my role today in the work that I do has definitely been impacted by the people in the late 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, you know, who put residential school issues on the table and then said, okay, we need a program to support our residential school survivors, you know. And, you know, it's kind of the ripple effect. So, right from the 80s, 90s, our tribal council has been kind of, sorry, that's my phone.
So I think it's mine.
So, our program has kind of been impacted, you know, by those people who laid the groundwork.
And always went back.
Yeah.
Went back to
Yeah.
that and all the programs. That's
So,
wonderful.
Yeah, so, you know, those people who put residential school issues on the table, after that, we were fortunate to get funding for the Healing Project. So that project was about connecting. So, you know, we had workers who were just about gathering people, getting together, doing cedar, you know, making shawls. It was just about connecting. And then we were really fortunate to become one of 5 pilot projects across Canada. This is where the Cutural program came from, mental wellness team. And so we got that funding, and then this program is about gathering people, but it's also about going a bit deeper, you know, and supporting them, their mental health. Yeah.
And touching into the trauma, but coming back out.
Yeah.
Coming back out into wellness and into connection and relationship.
Yeah. And using our traditional arts and crafts as a part of integrating, you know, processing trauma, their stories, and yeah. Should we move on to the?
Yes. We must begin.
Yeah, so culture and its connection to healing trauma. I shared, you know, my story of how my family was supported with the cultural ceremony. So ceremony and healing is about restoring and reconnecting of the self, family, community, culture, nature, spirit. I just wanted to share this quote because I thought it was profound. It was profound to me. When you pray for something, you start thinking, you begin to be aware of a lot of things. If you pray for guidance, you will get that guidance through yourself. Mentally, you're getting alert for what's in store. And that reminds me of what they call the self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. What you focus on, you make happen. So when you're focusing on positive, you know, that positive is going to come out, much like the vision boarding. So these are just some images, you know, that are related to some of the cultural healing approaches. We use the drum and the rattle for the songs and chants. We use water, ocean, river, drinking water. I mentioned that water was used in the ceremony for my family. After, you know, it was important for us to have a drink of the water inside, but traditionally we also use water to cleanse our spirit. The strength of water. Spruce and letting go. I mentioned a bit about the spruce, using spruce boughs for letting go ceremonies. Stones and letting go. You know, I've also used stones as a form of, you know, putting whatever you're carrying into the stone and throwing it into the ocean. all of these ceremonies, you know, the teaching behind it is that what you're doing is you're giving it to the Creator. It's something that the Creator can handle. If you're in that place of feeling overwhelmed, then you can always put it to the Creator. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, okay. Cedar and moving forward, I mentioned we use cedar. Cedar for us is protection, and it's, you know, traditionally it was used for so many different things. I've got, you know, I wear my cedar headband when I'm doing work.
She also has beautiful cedar earrings and cedar bracelets.
Yeah. So cedar is used for a lot of different things, mostly for protection. We also use the canoe as an analogy. The canoe as an analogy to who we are. You know, I have my own canoe. What's important to me? What do I want to put in my canoe? How am I moving forward in my canoe? It can also be used for groups in terms of vision, having a vision for your group, for your team, for your organization. We also use storytelling. Him, what's up? So the stories provide a sense of groundedness and connection, teaching, self-exploration, and self-understanding. Also, it's a real connection to the land we're living on. A lot of the stories, you know, incorporate the environment.
Land, animal, the environment, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and
It was well, that was it. Okay, so we have a few minutes left to wrap up for questions and comments. If you want to keep typing, Davina, if you can pull up our video conference, please. Thank you so much for sharing with us your PowerPoint. And,
Thanks for hanging out. Yeah. Thanks.
And online, can you take is it possible just to go back to our video conference online too? Do we have the webinar?
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
I think there's one on here specifically about how do we support those that have no roots or connections, like if they're adopted out or have no family to draw from or no history to help them understand. And then she kind of answered her own question. I guess adopt them into something or help them find a way to ground themselves. But maybe if you guys want to take a turn at this.
well,
These are really good stories. Leah's going to tell.
like what?
You know what? I'm sure you know which stories I'm telling. How the community does this.
I mean, there's a few things that come to my mind. Well, you know, going back to the teaching of treating people as human beings, you know. But in the work that, you know, our team does, I've witnessed blanketing ceremonies, you know, where somebody who may be disconnected is acknowledged for who they are. You know, I guess it's a blanketing ceremony and you know, like a coming of age kind of thing, but not a coming of age. You know, something that may have been missed when they were growing up. So it's that, given that time and space to be acknowledged as a human being, that they do have a place and a role. That's what I think.
Yeah, and there are some beautiful ceremonies that have gone on for individuals, or there's also been ceremonies for groups of people who were taken away to residential school and who are brought back into the community.
Yeah. So I can think of one in particular we did in one of the isolated communities with a handful of residential school survivors. We did a welcoming home ceremony, and we used the spruce, we used the cedar, but we also invited the children in the community to be a part of the ceremony. So with the spruce, they thought about everything they wanted to let go of, that they didn't want to have in their canoe anymore. When they were ready, they let it go, moved forward onto the spruce, and then we physically walked them from one end of the room to the other where the children were. And the children greeted them, and hugged them and said, "Welcome home." And it was just powerful. It's hard to.
I can feel it right now in my body as you speak about it.
Yeah. So I could see something similar, for somebody who missed out on having a connection to their, biological family and community, where they're given this opportunity through a ceremony. And I think no matter who we are or where we come from, there's things that you can do to acknowledge, that process. It may not be exactly the same. You may not use spruce, you may not use cedar, but there's something within your territory, within your nation that can be that
Well, I think that answered her question she was talking about. She said that brought a tear to her eye. Thank you.
Well, I want to say that it's in those spirits, what I have learned from the ceremony that you and the Kwasa team do, that informs my practice with other non-First Nations folk who aren't connected to their culture and might not be connected to those spiritual places. And that I know we need to get some balance in there for things to move forward. And so so this is, yes, specific to people who are disconnected from, First Nations people who are disconnected from their culture, but there's a lot of non-First Nations people who are disconnected from spirit and culture. And we can be creative again in ways that fit. Sometimes it's in, I have blankets that get given away quite often in my office, because that's part of what happens maybe on a one-on-one situation or in a family. So again, that's this teaching that has come to me about the importance of these kind of acknowledgements, rituals, ceremonies.
Video conference, do you have any last comments or questions? I can take a few here. Thank you so much for attending.
Hi, I just want to really thank you a lot, because I'm an IRS support worker and I just recently started 3 weeks ago, and I'm finding it really overwhelming. And I've experienced that one of the ceremonies with my mom, because she was a generation survivor, and this really puts things into perspective with my job. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for participating.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for joining us today. We'll hopefully be having them back, and we do have a lot more webinars planned for all the way up till December this year, so please keep coming back to register, and I think we'll try to work on some new workshops. Is there anything else for video conference to wrap up?
Oh yeah, we really enjoyed the session. I know we dwindled down to just one a few minutes ago, but Trauma is hard to deal with all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people have a hard time dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again. Yeah, and I guess we're going into lunch, so a lot of you, if you have to sign off, that's wonderful. I'll be sending out the PDF, the PowerPoint presentation in PDF form. It'll be on our site, learningscircle.ubc.ca, on Dee and Anita's page, and also I'll do an email. Thank you again, everybody on the webinar. Thanks for joining and all of your great questions and interaction.
And I just want to say that I really appreciate the new form of smoke signals being sent out.
Electronic smoke signals.